Welcome to the Sources of Vigour, a project exploring how individuals and organizations contribute to sustainability and community well-being. Today I'm speaking with Mike Francis, a lifelong nonprofit professional whose work spans mental health advocacy, disability support, employment programs, and hospice care. His story illustrates how social sustainability, caring for people, equity, and inclusion forms the foundation of thriving communities. Mike, can you start by telling listeners a little bit about yourself and what first drew you into nonprofit work?
Yeah, sure. I think that growing up in a family where you volunteered or were voluntold throughout my early years when I'm forming my sense of self, that had a lot to do with it. Always being that friend who was the listener whenever people needed to chat about things. It just kind of draws you into wanting to know more about people. And of course, that kind of work that's what nonprofits do, right? You have to care deeply about other people. You have to understand other people's needs and figure out how you can actually achieve those needs or help them achieve those needs. In a value sorted way, so like to be able to do it without anything crazy and elaborate. So yeah, that's what kind of got me started. For better or for worse, that's where we are.
Awesome. But you've worked in so many areas. You've had disability support, hospice care, mental health, employment services. What connects all these roles for you?
People who need help understanding complex or difficult things. I think, whether it's government programs or life situations, that's the important piece, that if I can put it together for somebody so that they don't have to struggle to understand it, then, that's kind of my personal mission. So it's, if there's somebody out there that they really need help finding a job, or they are dealing with the death of a loved one, or going through something with mental illness, or finding friction because of their disability, it's always comes back to that's a really hard, complex puzzle to try to put together by yourself. And if I can help them with it, that's what I want to do.
When you think about the word sustainability, what does this word mean for you in a social or community sense?
So that's, I think, one of the things that I find most important about community work is it's really easy to have an idea. It's really easy to get fired up about something that sounds interesting or fun to be able to help people. But the sustainability part is the missing piece for a lot of people. Yeah, I can go out and get a grant and help somebody do something quick and easy, but if it's not sustainable, if we don't have maybe funding or a staff person, or if it's not made part of somebody's job description, that they continue to work with that individual or that group of people in the long term, you can actually make people, your beneficiaries, you can make them worse off than when you started. That's not my style. I think it has to be something where at least I have an idea where they're going to be able to move forward. So if you take me out of the equation, they can still keep going. The program can still keep going. That's the important piece. So for me, every program I work on, I want it to be at least see the goal of sustainability before we start, so that I'm not setting people up for failure.
So you like the idea of long-term planning instead of quick fixes?
Yeah. Quick fixes get us into a lot of trouble. We see that with a lot of marginalized populations, that they have had people, well-meaning people, who've jumped in and either tried to help because they thought they had the answer without diving deeply in, or without getting the actual beneficiaries' opinions and feedback on the program before they started, only to find out that, this isn't going to work. We need to try something else. Mm-hmm. It absolutely has to be the sustainable, at least have that, like I say, that mindset before you start something.
Awesome. So in one of our class readings, the author Elizabeth Lang talks about the emotional dimensions of sustainability work. We both know that working in nonprofits can be emotionally demanding. So what keeps you motivated and resilient over the long term with this kind of day-to-day work?
Keeps me motivated, I guess, is always coming back to reminding myself about the good that I'm doing, the people that I have helped, and knowing that if I have an answer, I've been sharing it. And so when things get really hard and I get overwhelmed by the sheer volume of work at a certain season of the year or time in a program, it's always looking back and saying, okay, how is this benefiting the community? How can I look back someday, or how can my daughter look back someday and think about what her dad did, and hopefully have people genuinely feeling like it was I was doing positive work. So that always brings me back. But it's also too, like, having strong boundaries to not push yourself to do things that you can't repeat or that you shouldn't do, and sacrificing your own energy in the long term just for the sake of a quick win.
Mm-hmm. I think that probably comes back to that sustainability idea you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
If you push yourself too far, you burn out, the program doesn't remain, it doesn't continue being sustainable if you're not sustainable.
Yeah, if in the early stages of any program, I understand that it's probably going to be me that makes the program work, but it's always working at it until the other pieces come along that I know will make it a longer term thing.
Can we talk about your work in disability support? Can you tell me what you do and what makes the organization unique?
So with the disability support right now with Autism Nova Scotia, it is, I think the biggest thing that makes us different is that we are person-directed in every single aspect of what we do. And it's both the best part of what we do and the hardest part to explain to outsiders. So when somebody's never heard of person-directed service, it takes me a few minutes to explain to them exactly why we do it. But once they understand the premise, then they always agree that, wow, this is a really amazing way to do things. Because every client who walks in my door, I'm empowered by the people who started our organization and kind of keep the lights on, that to just figure out for that client, what do I have to do? And as long as I'm doing things that are potentially repeatable in case anybody else comes in and asks for the same thing, and within the mandate of her job, I can pretty much do it. And that, for me, that trust that the organization has in me to make the right decision, definitely keeps it going. So by having a client come in and say, I need help with blank, 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 I just focus on that. I don't have to overwhelm them with things that they don't need to do in order to achieve their goals. I don't need to overwhelm them with paperwork that doesn't have any bearing on their future success or their well-being. I do all the things I know that person needs. I get the information that I need from them to make sure that we meet our goals. But my goal is to help them reach theirs. And so that's wonderful, because I have worked in agencies where you had a checkbox you had to try to get people to fit into. My greatest skill in those places was to be more around person-directed and actually help figure out how to make that box get checked by doing the thing that the client really needs. But in this role with disability support, I can just do it. I don't have to move things around. I don't have to contemplate how this fits. it just does.
So you've also been involved with hospice care and end-of-life support organizations. How did those experiences shape your view of community well-being?
When I worked at the Hospice Society, my job was supporting the volunteers who were directly engaging with people who were actively dying in the palliative care unit of our local hospital, and also fundraising to try to help do other programs that our social workers could run for people after the death of a loved one, or helping people who were dying kind of come to grips with or understand what was happening, and prepare for their end of days and help their family. So I learned very much that you cannot have a one-size-fits-all mentality anymore. It kind of ripped away that old yoke that came from some of the employment programs I was part of, making people fit into boxes, to say you can't tell someone who's dying that they have to do something in a certain way. Like, you have to die just right for your family to get help, or your loved one died in a certain way. We can't support you with your grief, because we had to take people as they came in, and that helped me in a long way make the bridge between where I was, which was adapting boxes so that they got checked, to trying to work with just whatever people needed when they came in the door. So yeah, it was a learning experience for sure, but it was a way for me to also work through things that came up during my time there, and really did play a role with what I needed at the time, which was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you also tell me a bit about those employment programs and when you worked with the Employment Support Agency?
Yeah, so I worked for two different employment groups, and I think the distinction between the two was the first one that I joined when I first got out of school. We worked along and helped people either, make career decisions with their future, get funding to go back to school, start businesses, things like that. And then in the second agency that I was part of, we were actually, the original agency was absorbed into another agency that was bigger than us, so that we could continue doing what we did at the first place, but then we had additional programming that we had access to, right within our team, to be able to do more for clients and help them figure out maybe some interim steps sometimes toward their goal, that we could do more hands-on instead of just sending them away to do things and come back and check a box. So, those programs were, I think, a lot of government regulation. I think that's where my skill set came into play. Of, I could look at something very complex or even completely unrelated and say, that sounds a lot like this other thing, and then come up with a unique solution that would help a client, still within the rules of what the programs needed, but could get them to where they needed to be. It was also a time for me because it was the first 15 years of my career, it really structured how I was going to be positioning myself in the community, because as someone who stuck around long term in that role, I got to sit at tables that other people didn't get to sit at, simply because I was still there. So I was, when you're working once you're over 10 years into any nonprofit, I think you just start to become part of the furniture, and they incorporate you into all the different decision making. People actually start coming to you with, looking for your opinion on things, so you can have a say in bigger programming that can help even more people. So that gave me that step up, that strong base for what I wanted to do in the future.
Yeah. I mean, that's 4 out of the 6 nonprofits that I'm at least aware of you've worked with.
Yeah.
I feel like even just the four we talked about so far, like you're the kind of person who sees the bigger picture, but can make that picture smaller for the people that need those day-to-day things that, those changes as well. Let's talk about the next nonprofit, your community play place that you helped create. Can you tell me the vision behind it and how it impacted families?
Yeah, the community play place, Riley's place, that was interesting because that obviously came along. I named it after my daughter. We were going to indoor play spaces in other communities that were 45 minutes to an hour away to try to do something fun, that we couldn't do back home. We couldn't do here in Truro. All the physically active enjoyment pieces were either the gymnastics club, which was fine once a week, or it was the parks, and you can't go to those when it's raining or snowing and things like that.
Freezing.
So yeah, freezing, and there's not as much variety in those. Like you can swing, you can slide, you can climb, you can throw, but they are mostly all the same. When you bring that same fun inside, you can add extra things that are, once you're climate controlled, that you can do all year round. When you're hot, when you're cold, or whatever, you can still play. And because there's walls, it also is safe to keep, kids contained for kids who like to explore. But it gives them a great deal of activity, and so to get that started was sort of, I think, that vision of it's working elsewhere and we go and travel to it. Why can't we have something like that in our community and bringing it back here? And again, it for me was like, how do I make this work? The numbers all seemed like they could do some good, and we could have a thing that people from all over could go to, and it was accessible fun.
Nice. The last nonprofit I'm aware of, you also co-founded a mental health advocacy group. Can you discuss this and any of the gaps in the system you were trying to address with this group?
Yeah, so with the Outsider Insight Project, we use art to start a conversation. It is that we believe art and the creation of art is a great piece of anybody's mental wellness routine. So to be able to keep people on a good path when they're recovering from mental illness or struggling with their mental health. We have various different people who are artists that we can kind of look to be able to say, let's take your art, we want to put it on a t-shirt, a sweater, a hoodie, whatever, to put it out in the community and have people think about mental health and reduce stigma to mental illness. Like, we can start conversations when somebody sees a design that they really like, they want to comment on it, and they want to be able to, just approach you and get that started. So the reason we did it was there was this, I think, our founder, Gavin, was able to see how much creating art helped him in his own journey to deal with mental illness, and just kind of inspired other people to get behind it. So when he met me, my thought was the project he was working on needed to have some project walls, some boundaries. So we created a nonprofit with it, so that it would be something people could believe in, something people could understand, but also give credibility to the voice that he was sharing with his story, so that people could get behind it with their dollars and their motivation to be able to keep it going. It is a voice for people who feel like they don't have one, and but more importantly, I think it is getting people talking about a very difficult subject and sharing and feeling heard on their own path.
So, the Elizabeth Lang reading from class also discusses that sustainability requires a relational approach. In all your roles, have you seen collaboration or relationships between organizations make a bigger impact than one could alone?
Yeah, something that we talk about all the time here is when I'm out meeting with community partners, there's so many times when you see people, and usually the same nonprofits that don't come to the community tables, that, you know, they're repeating programs that somebody else is doing, and that puts you in direct competition with, you know, as far as funding goes and things like that. When you're in a small community, you can't go trying to steal people's funding. And if you're duplicating service and trying to use the money for your mission that somebody else could be using for theirs to be able to reach the people who really need it, then that's not helping anybody, or at least it's not helping the community overall. So when we look at working together, we can use the idea that many hands make light work. So when we have the opportunity to collaborate on different projects, you know, for instance, a reverse job fair program that we do as a collaborative group here locally, we've got, you know, I think 5 different agencies, including one government body, that sits at the table, and we work on finding solutions for clients together. You know, if there's something I can do and that one of the other agencies or 2 of the other agencies can chip in on that same client, because let's face it, we share a lot of clients between us all, we can help them to figure out answers to their problems all together, and we can just stack the help that somebody's going to need. So anytime we can work with somebody, that client also knows that the community as a whole believes in them and wants to support them. And that's an important piece that people often forget, is when we work together, they don't understand, like if you're not someone who needs social supports in the community, people don't often understand that you can sit together and talk to the client and provide all of the supports together, and that they know that it's better for them to be in a community that cares like that. And then when they're looking at the community someday, when they have gotten themselves hopefully to a better place, with the help of the agencies that they accessed back when they needed us, they're more likely to give back and to think positively about their community as well. So yeah, it just makes the community go round and round if we all help each other.
Mm-hmm. So I can probably guess your answer to the next question, but I'm going to ask anyhow. Do you see compassion, social well-being, and sustainability as connected?
Yeah.
You want to tell me how?
It's definitely an important piece, because you know, if you can't have compassion for other people, you're never going to see them for more than just what they're taking. You know, you're not going to be able to see the value that somebody brings to the community as well. And yeah, you really need to be able to see that there are good positive aspects of being able to help somebody else, whether you're ever going to need that or not, that same help. Just knowing that you're helping the community and having that compassion for them, I think that's a big piece. Mm-hmm. And if you try to separate those things out, or if you remove any of those things, any community just becomes everybody for themselves, and that leaves a lot of losers. Like, we get a few winners and a lot of losers if we start taking out those factors for being able to help. We just say, oh, we're going to help the people who deserve it, or we're going to help people who look like us. We're just leaving so many problems out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Is there anything that you wish the general public understood better about nonprofit work?
I think the biggest thing that gets in the way for us here, and I'll just use Autism Nova Scotia in general right now, is when you have different nonprofit agencies, people do tend to believe, at least here in Canada and for small communities, that all of our nonprofits somehow are funded by the government, by somebody else. And yeah, we get grants and things and some funding from different government bodies, but a lot of the time, the nonprofits that are here in the community doing some of the most important work to get people the services that they need, they're coming on the backs of donations. They're coming on the backs of returned bottles and cans. They're coming on the backs of, I saved up my allowance to give to an agency. They're coming on, the little tiny bit that somebody has left from their old age pension at the end of the month to donate to an important cause. Right? They're the clothes that people stop wearing and they donate to a clothing bin to be sold off to somebody else who needs them, so that a donation can come to an agency like us to be able to do the work that we do. We don't get a lot of government funding, definitely not enough to make us sustainable, and far cry from what we really need in order to do the best work. There's a lot of things we can't do because we don't have more funding available, whether it's from government or from a foundation or from private donation or whatever. But I think the big thing is a lot of people, many places that I've worked, and I don't 100% always understand where the thought process comes to. I think more of it is people just don't think about it unless they work in it or until they need that service, is who actually pays, who can pay. That's the biggest difference between nonprofit and for-profit, is who pays for the work to get done. Most of the time, you cannot charge the people who are being helped for the services that they get. If you could afford to pay for the service, then you would. It would be a company, it would be a business opportunity, it would be a service like getting a Botox injection that you're paying for because you don't need it, you want it, unless you have a physical challenge that means you need Botox injections. But people who are coming in for job search help or help finding an apartment to live in because they're being evicted or they're being mentally or physically abused by a landlord or a family member or something like that, nobody's paying for that. We, by hook or by crook, we put those things together based on all of the different sources of funding that come to us, and we make it work. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is if I could just have a direct line to all the people in our community to say, if you need help, or if you ever needed help, or if you think you might ever need help in the future with any problem that you can't solve on your own, you're probably going to need a nonprofit, because we're the ones doing the work. So you need to understand, we need your help. We need people to care and have that same compassion from the earlier question to be able to, to do the work we need to right now. And for people who give, and people who give, whether it's their money or their time, because not everybody has money, but some people have time and not money, and some people have money and not time. So if they give whatever they can to doing things for nonprofits, it really does make what we do actually work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That actually kind of leads me into the next question really well, because we had a different class reading by author Martin Mulligan, and he discussed the idea of incremental but sustained action, the idea that small, consistent actions can create larger changes in the community. Even just people donating their time can be those small, sustained actions. So, in your experience, have any small, consistent actions ever led to unexpectedly large or long-term impacts in your work?
Yeah, I think that the piece about the small sustained actions are things that are sometimes simple, like when you're done with clothing, let's say, or your bottles and cans, and you're getting rid of things, instead of returning your recyclables to the depot to get a refund for yourself, you're donating them to a charity that you appreciate. You are taking the clothing that you're not wearing anymore, and instead of trying to toss it in a bag and take it to the dump, or to just to maybe sell it online on an online marketplace for your own benefit, throwing it into one of the many clothing bins in an area, and so that those clothes can be either redistributed to people who don't have the income to buy new things, or as what we benefit from at Autism Nova Scotia, the clothing bins that go to a central processing space and then sold to thrift stores and then sent to other agencies around the world to support people who need them. They get sold by weight, and so then the donation comes based on whatever was put in the clothing bin in our community, in our bin with our logo on it, to be able to fund our programs. I often use them for our social programs and things like that, but like those small pieces that somebody can do, those small changes somebody can make in their personal life, can lead to an agency being able to do something that they couldn't do before. If I didn't have those regular small donations, there's a lot of the things that I wouldn't be able to do. I would have to focus strictly on that narrowest part of my mission, and wouldn't be able to do the little extras on the outside that help people feel like there's a community here for them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it makes a big difference. It's the same as other authors like Charles Duhigg, changing your habits. It's the little tiny things, the step-by-step things you do every single day that are going to create these new positive habits. And it's the same idea with Mr. Mulligan saying that you need to help consistently in the community. It's changing those little aspects of you to be able to help the community. It makes all the difference in the world for somebody.
Not to toot my own horn here, but I have a bag of clothes and I will be dropping them off behind the rec on the way out when I leave here.
Yeah.
So for anybody listening, if they want to support Autism Nova Scotia in Truro, there's a clothing bin right behind the rec. It's an easy one to get to.
Yeah, we've got 7 of them around the community, so we can be found.
Okay. In your view, what makes a community truly flourish?
A community can truly flourish when the people who are in positions to make decisions that affect the greater population do so with all aspects of the community in mind. So when you're bringing businesses into the community, or if you're bringing new people into the community, or you're trying to bring doctors into the community, or whatever it is that you're trying to do that you feel would be good for you, if you're able to also engage with people outside of the ones that look like you or sound like you or act like you, we can pull everybody up and do well. And if the community will flourish when everyone that's here feels like they're being supported, and they feel like they belong. Because if you have a community where everybody feels like they're attached to the general well-being of the community, and that by doing that, by attaching themselves to the community's good, they will also be benefiting from the what's here in the community. Things can really take off, and it can feel like we're all pulling in the same direction. So yeah, that's where the flourish would come in for me. If we're all pulling in the same direction, we'll feel like we belong, and then we will be happier.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So what do you think the future of nonprofit and community work looks like in the next 10 years?
Well, I think in the next 10 years, the way things have been going, I think will play a much larger role in the overall wellness and well-being of the community. Governments are finding it tighter and tighter and tighter to be able to meet their obligations, whether that is for the increased amount of obligations that they have or paying for the mistakes that they've made, which I think has been the biggest thing in our in our field with human services, is the governments actually admitting that they've made mistakes and done wrong to people, and trying to find ways to deal with that and to make people whole again. Nonprofits are the people who are doing that work once the carnage is over, that was created.
And then like an organization like Autism Nova Scotia has grown so much in the past 5 years because of, all the things you're talking about. Like in the next 10 years, we'll see these nonprofits as being bigger and having more impact. Or is that something you agree with?
Yeah, I think that there is that. I think the other thing about the community that will be different in the next 10 years is the nonprofits who make the biggest impact need to be able to find ways to also change, to be more accepting of new ways of doing things, and not relying on what they think has worked. We need to find new ways to become more sustainable, and that could be something like having a combination of charity and business together, like a social enterprise, and being able to earn income for the charity that allows us to do the good work above just having our hands out to government and the community to say, please give. Like, if we can give something tangible, whether it's a service or a product, to people in the community that they will happily part with their funds for, or whether, like I said, whether it's a service or some kind of item, then we can use that money to be able to go back to the programs and make them something that is, we find that fee payer, I guess, for the programs where we need to get the support. So yeah, in the next 10 years, I really feel like that'll be the way our community will change the most, is by charities doing more in the business world and businesses doing more in the charity world, coming together to help each other. Because if things continue, especially with artificial intelligence and things like that, we will have fewer and fewer people potentially with more and more, and we need to find ways to redistribute that. And for some people, it really has to be, I have to give you something in order for you to give me money, and I factor in the money you're giving me, I factor in the cost of doing all the other things that I want to do. And if we can have people who can see both sides of that, we can do very well. Because we're all, in a small community especially, we're all competing for those same dollars every year. Eventually we start eating each other, and so we have to be careful to start giving more to people who don't necessarily need us and our services directly, so that we can have more to give to people that do need us.
Mm-hmm. So one of the main themes that we talk about in almost all of the readings in class was about hope. So with that idea of the future of nonprofit, and in your opinion, like, do you see hope for the future within the nonprofit realm?
Yeah, it's actually part of my own disability, which is, living with ADHD. Whether it's struggle with or whether I take advantage of the idea of omnipotential, I really think anything's possible if you do it right. So if we can figure out ways to make the connections that we need to increase individual supports, then this can be great. I think that with the changes that are coming, some of my favorite thought leaders in pretty much any subject that I pay attention to all feel like we can benefit from some of the things that are happening in the world today to help others. We can find solutions to problems that we didn't have answers for before. We can find ways to make money to pay for programming that are needed for people. We might even be able to give people the skills or the tools to be able to just better support themselves, and then have those, nonprofit agencies be there to support people in learning how to use those tools. If I teach a person to fish, they're going to be able to eat forever, as opposed to just doling out fish once a week, right? We can actually make sure that they have what they need before they need us to get it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think I'm always hopeful. That's just who I am. I don't think I could do this work if I wasn't full of hope for the future that way. I think that we will figure it out. If we agree that we can't do things the same old way anymore. We really have to just tear that down and work together in a broader way to do more.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thank you for chatting with me, Mike. And thank you to everybody who's listening. Thank you for sharing and listening to his story, and for Mike showing us what it really means to be a source of vigor in the community.